My name's Rad Wizard Ralph, and I'm here for your Week 1 Radical Roundup. First, I must apologise if there's any screaming in this recording. There's a chaos ritual sacrifice going on outside the studio. Anyway, let's begin. A goofy game, as all halfling games strive to be. It immediately started as a mess. A deep kick from Andui, the halfling team's expert kicker, instantly caused trouble for the Nurgle team as they struggled to retrieve it bouncing very fortuitously for the halflings. This meant they could sprint as fast as their stubby little legs could carry them into the Nurgle half, and all you budding coaches out there know how much of a mess that can be. Taking advantage of the chaos, as all good halfling players should, Hot Dog scored a particularly vicious kick into the revolting beast of Nurgle, but the regenerating flesh on that disgusting blob thwarted any hopes that we'd seen the last of it for this match. All it seemed to do was anger the Nurgle team. With his very next action, Volgu landed a blow so hard on Kielbasa that both players fell over from the force, but Kielbasa got the worst of it. His team's apothecary was too busy sampling the famed halfling cooking to help, and he was pronounced dead minutes later. Getting revenge for the earlier kick, and we were swiftly injured after that, but nowhere near as serious as his teammate. Much more importantly, however, Bangers Jr., a known friend of the killed halfling, decided to pack all of his effort into a retaliatory strike when he was hit by one of the warriors of Nurgle, injuring him so hard he'll miss the next match. Nurgle's next opponent will thank him for having to face one less of those putrid things, that's for sure. Caught up in a frenzy of murder and chaos, neither team did much with the ball this half either, meaning both teams still had the chance to score the first touchdown of the game starting in the second half. Understandably perturbed by the sheer disgusting nature of the Nurgle team, the three men couldn't throw halflings the way they usually would. So we got to see a rare sight, a march down the field. This advance left poor Bangers Jr. exposed, however, and after a big hit it was worried he'd face the same fate as his poor teammate. The apothecary was around this time, though, and he was able to save the halfling, although he'll need a game off to recover. The advance did work, though. Lau Lau was eventually able to get down the field and plonk the ball down for the only touchdown of the match. The Nurgle team did have enough time to score another, but some surprisingly proficient halfling stall play and an almost successful turnaround brought just enough time for the game to end relatively peacefully. The halflings will be happy with that win. A long kick from the elves gave them an early scoring chance as they ran past the Chaos main line, which culminated in a good block from low-hanging Flute to give Harpshooter the first touchdown. It seemed we were in for an exciting game as the ball soared back over the Chaos line. The Chaos team had been practicing well in the off-season, however, it seems, and they'd all but perfected their cage strategy, with their captain, Shamon, at its head. While not the most exciting to watch, it was certainly efficient, allowing him to square the game up just before half-time. When the second half rolled around, it looked to be déjà vu for Coach Kira as Harpshooter dove down the side of the pitch, but an untimely slip gave the Chaos team the time they needed to get their defence into shape, aided by a friendly pass from the crowds. The cage was then formed, and it marched confidently down the field once more towards ultimate victory. Unfortunately for the Wood Elves, this wasn't enough to sate the bloodthirsty Chaos team, while Coach Kira had turned them into a great scoring machine. In their hearts they yearned for blood, and a dangerous stomp on the neck of Base in the Hole gave him a niggling injury. Not only will he have to miss a game, but he'll be a lot more vulnerable in future matches. We had a wonderful match down at Tokyo Tower today. It started off exciting with a plethora of armor breaks for the Lizards, who knocked down Kislev player after Kislev player, yet Ted Pole showed off some mighty fine acrobatics to get the first injury of the match on the ball carrier. However, this skill wouldn't pay dividends. A wonderful team play immediately afterwards from the Lizards really showed the coordination Coach Ray has been able to teach them, with the strong players clearing the way for a quick handoff to secure a very early first touchdown. However, it seems that play tired them out, failing 4 going for it long runs in 2 turns, and then a failed blitz that ended in the ball carrier punching over the offending Saurus certainly wasn't in the plan. Perhaps Coach Ray needs to implement more stamina training for those big lizards. Either way, it set up a simple path for Hypnotoad, after shrugging off the skink on its tail, to make it 1-1 and round out an exciting first half. At the start of the second half, there were plenty of proficient plays from the Lizards, and leaping plays to trip the ball from the Kislevians, which would have made highlights in a lesser match. But if I detailed every event from this one, we'd be here all day, so you'd best go watch it yourself. Even so, none of these plays seemed to stick, with the Skinks always retrieving the ball once more and then it being stripped from them by the bouncy Northmen. This couldn't last forever, however, and an untimely bit of gymnastics failure from Hypnotoad, the hero earlier in the match, would give the Lizards the space they needed not only to score their second touchdown, but also to knock 7 bells out of Jim Hopper, a Kislevite known for his frenzy on the pitch. He'll need the rest of the game out to recover from that one. Kislev were on the ropes then. They didn't have long to score another, and it took them a while to even get it up the pitch. With enough time only for one play left, a frankly ridiculous series of events took place. A punch to the Skink holding the ball sent it careening into the sidelines, where a packed crowd fired it off right to the end zone of the Lizards. A quick leap from Lord Croak later, and they'd squared the game up with what must have been their last touch on the ball in the entire match. Amazingly tense finish to what will almost certainly be known as one of the matches of the season. This game started off as you'd expect from this matchup, a slugfest. The Dwarves had the initial advantage, partially thanks to a star player that they tempted onto the pitch, likely with sacks of oath gold, Grim Ironjaw. Pulling the play to the sides, they managed to get a handful of good bashes in, eagerly helped out by the crowd. This paid dividends. A supporter's boot to the face of Chopped, a hobgoblin, almost took his life before the team's apothecary stepped in. What followed was a slew of removals, including an important KO on a bull centaur, but none of that seemed to matter as the game was held to 0-0 by half-time, partially thanks to a wonderful intercepting leap from Mamie Oliver. The second half started much the same as the first, and besides trading blows with a few injuries, there wasn't much to speak about. That is, until a fated drive down the side of the pitch went completely amiss, when Gordon Ramsay was pushed into the hungry crowd, and brutally murdered while the team apothecary was still tending to Chopped. With no chance of recovery and the loss of their captain, their Chaos Dwarf morale was shattered until the end of the match, and possibly longer, leading to what would ultimately be an easy touchdown for the Dwarves, and a very satisfying game for them. It took a while for this match to warm up. The Lizards started with the ball, but ran into what was basically an orc roadblock. It took them about half the time they had, plus some side-switching, to be able to break through the line, and even then it didn't bear fruit. The Goblin was there, waiting, in order to coordinate a very effective and brutal stop. That Skink wouldn't be getting back up this game. Taknit then picked up the ball himself, dancing across the pitch to pull a sneaky on the Lizards and score the first touchdown himself, abusing the fact his Saros opponent fell over under the weight of his own muscles trying to catch up to the speedy ball carrier. It was as plain as day what play Coach Stryker had called going into the second half, but the Lizards were still powerless to stop it. No matter how much pressure they put on Jim from accounting, he still made that pass like he made his sales targets last quarter, allowing Taknit to sprint to the end. After that, the Orc roadblock was set up once more. It looked like they wouldn't quite be able to hold the Lizards back for a moment, until suddenly, Fireball! Coach Stryker had paid off a wizard before the match, and he used it to halt the Lizardman advance, and nab the ball for himself. There wasn't the time to score again, though. And that was how it ended, an emphatic victory for the Orcs. Coach New will feel hard done by that game, since his tactics weren't bad, but his team just weren't up to the task, with incredible individual performances from Jim and Taknit sealing the game away for the Orcs. This game didn't start out as anything much, as weird as that is for a Goblin game, but with some dull chainsaws, not so bouncy pogos, and a scoring focus for the humans, it added up to a relatively dull first play with minimal murder, ending in Christian adding to his impressive touchdown tally. The Goblins, with some handy bribes, managed to put together an offense with their secret weapons still on the pitch, however, and bring one back, courtesy of Grot Snobbler, the team's founder. Only 2 Goblins had been felled at this point as well. Things were looking surprisingly good for them going into the second half, considering they were up against the champions and had a massive team value difference. Things swiftly stopped going quite so quickly their way, however. Despite receiving the ball at the start of the second half, injuries would begin coming thick and fast for the poor Goblins, with Baron in particular getting his gloves very wet with blood. The goblins turned this to their advantage, though. Letting the humans get distracted with their bloodlust, they made a quick switchback play to get not food free, bearing down on the end zone with not a human player in sight. Things were not looking great for the goblins at next kickoff, though. They were down 6 players injured and 2 sent off, and they still had the better part of the half to stop the humans from scoring. It would take some incredible individual heroics. Unfortunately, that was exactly what they had up their sleeves. Death Thrower and Death Thrown put in 2 heroic runs, dodging every punch that came their way in order to tie up the cage and let the tackler make his own dodge to get a flimsy punch on Christian, who was holding the ball. With his guard down, as he thought he was safe in the cage, Christian was knocked over, dropping the ball. This let not Food, the hero scorer from earlier, make another heroic dodge-filled run to snatch the ball out from under the noses of the humans, jetting off towards the end zone. The humans weren't about to let that slide, however. Baron was back, and he knocked the absolute daylight out of Not Food, freeing the ball again for Christian to snap up. It would be Death Thrower's time to shine next. Surrounded on all sides, he made a particularly suicidal block onto Christian, and it worked. He landed a solid hit, but with Baron around this time there was no way he was getting to the ball. But still, maybe he'd done enough to stall the inevitable human advance. Christian was on his guard when the tackler came at him again, and this time he managed to keep his footing. Not so when he tried to run further up the pitch, however, falling over during his sprint. Surely there wouldn't be enough time to score now. Another desperate run from the goblins was thwarted, and Christian stood up for one last attempt. Knowing he didn't have enough time himself as the whistle was on the ref's lips, he took the ball over to Gordon, who was a faster sprinter, and he took it the distance he needed to bag the touchdown. A thrilling finish to a thrilling match. Certainly the best of the week, and that's saying something since we've had some exciting ones. What a week to start the round robin off on, folks. The sun was sweltering as we headed down to the pitch at Friendship Stadium. It didn't immediately affect any of the players, though, which meant we were down into the mosh pit that everyone expected this matchup to be. There were early removals on both sides, with players left and right going off KO'd or injured. But there was nothing serious as Captain Martha marched up the pitch for the Orcs. In a bind, she handed it off to Katie, who broke down the pitch at a pace unseen by Orc kind, never once faltering in her step, and finally pushing away John to grab the first touchdown of the match. Unusually early for a matchup such as this. This is where the undead started coming into their own, though, as their ability to regenerate any injury meant that whenever there was a stoppage of play, there was always a skeleton on the sidelines to pick up the slack. It wasn't enough to get a touchdown by the end of the half, though, as the heat started to affect more and more players before the second kickoff, crucially including one of the mummies. This didn't seem to stop them, though. A crucial punch for Carnival Splitter put an end to the Goblin Dream by smashing up his collarbone. I doubt we'll ever see him on the pitch again. The half turned scrappy after that, but eventually a decisive play from John, with what they certainly must have thought was the last play of the match, made it all square at 1-1. What he couldn't know, however, is that Coach Blue had trained these Orcs to be some of the most agile ever to grace a Blood Bowl pitch. A cross-field path from Martha followed, another fast, dodgy run gave them an astounding victory, right as the ref blew the final whistle. This is the second time this Orc team has done this. Truly a stroke of genius from Coach Blue. Their finals appearance looks a lot less fluky now. I've been Rad Wizard Ralph, coming at you with the first episode of the Radical Roundup. See you next week, folks. Don't remember to tune in to Extreme Insights for all the information you need on the upcoming matchups.